The story starts out with a quote by Dizzy Dean. But every day that I put on that uniform, it was the greatest day of my life. The movie starts out with a boy riding his bicycle across town, crossing yards, crossing streets. Finally it breaks through and lands on is riding his bicycle as fast as he can. We know he's late for something. There's a sign that says Sykeston 15 miles ahead on this dirt highway. Up the road a bit is a old man Graber's General Store gas station. You know the year's 1934. The little boy skids to a stop, takes his glove off the handlebars, and hurries inside. And inside are three old men sitting around a pot-bellied stove. And on that pot-bellied stove is an old radio. And they're bickering, trying to tune it into something that we just really can't figure out. Sitting next to them, when there's a line of chairs, like a pecking order, who sits where, there's a woman with a baby. And the boy breaks in and he buys a Coke for 5 cents and he slaps it down on the counter. And he says, Mr. Graber, am I late? And Mr. Graber kind of gives him a dirty look, like, don't bother me now. And all of a sudden they tune the radio and you hear the Cardinals are on the air. It's 1934 and it's the World Series, 7th game. Dizzy Dean is pitching. About that time a salesman comes in and goes, can I please get some gas for my car? And he hears the radio and he says, the Cardinals are playing? And they look at him, give him a strange look, and he goes, mind if I join you? Everybody sits down. They're entranced and are pulled in by the game of baseball right now. The camera passes their shoulders and slowly goes into the felt of the radio. The distant sounds fade, and you hear nothing, see nothing. Instantly, the camera pulls back from a Megatron scoreboard, and we hear the digital sounds at Busch Stadium. We're in present day now. But the crowd is sparse at Busch Stadium. The Cardinals lose the 13th game, and you see them go into the locker room, most of them not caring, some mad, but most of them not caring. And Billy, the pot-bellied, out-of-shape, old-time manager, 65 years of age, and his bench coach, Dink, who's been his sidekick for 20 years. And all of a sudden, there's a little scrap off to the side, and one player pushes another, a fight breaks out, and it's finally broken up by Billy to cut it out, and Dink takes a chair and throws it up against the lockers. The press is pushed out, and Billy goes, you know, I remember back when Ken Boyer used to play this game. About that time, you hear someone in the background say, who? The kids didn't care. They kind of interrupted him, and it was very disrespectful. It gets to Billy a little bit, and he walks out. And Dink shakes his head, and he goes, you boys just don't get it. He walks out too. And the story goes on where Dink is trying to find Billy because the GM, Walter Cleveland's looking for him. Billy is found out at home plate sitting on an old ball bucket. And Dink walks up to him and goes, what are you doing out here? And that's when Billy picks up that hand of dirt and he throws it down, and that's when he says, anywhere else, this is just dirt. But between these lines, it's every boy's dream. Why don't they get it, Dink? What's happened to this game? Dink makes his comment, I don't know. They're chewing sunflower seeds now instead of chewing tobacco, and one thing after another. Well, what comes to be? He goes, oh, by the way, Mr. Cleveland wants to see you up in the office. So Billy goes up into the office, and as he walks in, he goes, Walter, you wanted to see me? And the 32-year-old Walter turns around, who's the owner of the club, and says, Billy, it's not the same game as it used to be. It's about filling the stands, and you're not doing it. You're fired. And Dink's going to go with you. And you have the game, you have an off day tomorrow. The game's Sunday. We'll make an announcement after Sunday's game. And that's it. So Billy walks out. He's dejected. And that night, he's sitting by his bedside, and he looks at the picture of Mary, and he goes, you know, Mary, it's just been one heck of a day. So he crawls into bed, and he's halfway between sleep, and he's lying there, and all of a sudden a breeze wreathes in from the window and crosses his face enough to wake him. And he gets up, and he goes over to close it, but he looks down to the street corner, and underneath the street light's an old man, like an old homeless man. He's sitting there in a tattered overcoat and a fedora that's torn, and he's leaning on a cane. But the old man is looking straight up at Billy. Billy and their eyes meet for the first time, and the old man sort of looks at him and beckons. For some reason, Billy has to follow. Billy follows this old man block after block, corner after corner, alley after alley, until they wind up in vacant lot. Dark, shadowy, and he can't find the old man anywhere. He's standing at Grand and Dodier, the ruins of Sportsman's Park, where the old St. Louis Cardinals used to play. He's standing there and he trips over something, and he reaches down and he picks up a corner of a piece of broken off home plate. And he looks at it, and some of the game just faintly fills his ear, his mind. And at that time he goes, he cannot figure out what he's doing there. So he takes a handful of dirt and he throws it off to the side, and it hits something. And he walks over to see exactly what it is, and he finds two old doors laying on the ground. He picks up one of the doors after working to clear away some of the overgrowth, and there's stairways going down. And it's leading down to where the old training room used to be and the locker rooms of old Sportsman's Park. And as he's standing there, there's a door. He bangs on it, he moves it until it finally opens. And at that time, what he has done, he has called Dink in the meantime to come and pick him up because he can't figure out why he's there. So the next thing that happens, he's looking, he goes, I can't believe what I'm doing here, and he turns around and sees Dink's face. Scares him, he falls back into the door of the equipment room, knocks the door down, and what he sees next is all the old equipment, the old puff flower bases they look like, old line markers, watering holes, rakes, but over in the corner are two old trunks, equipment trunks. And Dink and Billy walk over there and they uncover the traveling trunks of the 1934 Cardinals, as though time has forgotten them. Inside are the uniforms and the equipment of the Cardinals, of the 1934 Gashouse Gang. Long story short, he makes the players wear them by convincing Walter, the manager, that this is a great PR ploy to fill the stands as an old-timers game, and wearing the Gashouse Gang uniforms. Well, he maneuvers Walter Cleveland into believing that's his idea, so he goes for it. The players don't like it, but they have to learn how to use the gloves and swing the old bats. It's almost cleansing themselves of modern baseball. Again, to make the long story short, they start playing like they care about the game again. They sign autographs. It's fun again. They start imitating some of the things the Gashouse players used to do, singing and up in the stands and helping folks. They make the connection again, and St. Louis buys into it. And they start dressing with all straw hats and pennants and raccoon coats, anything they can find of the 30s. They win and they win and they win, and they do some struggling, and Billy helps a lot and manages a lot of the players' problems to make them better people, not just better players. The players, like I said, their problems are being managed by Billy the way an old manager used to do. He solves the relationship between a player and his wife. Another player who goes out and plays as hard as he can, but not for the team. And he doesn't realize it's just a game. And it comes down, these multi-million-dollar players, they end up winning through the playoffs until finally they go to the World Series. And all the while, after every win, Billy will look up into the stands and go eye to eye with that old man, never knowing who he is. But there's some connection. It's the night of the 7th game, and of course they're playing Detroit. And please believe me, I've left a lot out. But that night that they're getting ready for that 7th game, Billy's in his house, and he kind of says a little prayer, and he kind of says, well, I know, God, that you can't be for one team or the other, but if you could help us out some way, that would be great. And he kind of bumbles through the prayer, and he kind of gives up, and he says, oh gosh, just tell Mary hi for me. But then he hears something in the front yard, a little commotion. Now what he hears is singing. He opens the door to find these multi-million-dollar ball players who never cared about this game or him or each other singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" to Billy. He walks out on the porch and puts his hands on the railing, and his bottom lip starts quivering, and he just says, this is all I ever wanted, for you to feel the game like you did in your backyard in Little League. This is what the game's about, fellas. Now you need to get to home tonight, you need to go home and get to sleep, because we got the 7th game of a World Series, and there ain't nothing more magical than the 7th game of a World Series. And about that time, Dink goes, I didn't think you were going to ask. And Dink pulls around, he has his sleeping bag. All these players have brought their sleeping bags, and they absolutely pile into Billy's house, one after another, until the last person. And it's Walter, the owner. And he looks down and goes, you mind if I join you? And Billy pats him on the back and goes, you're one of my boys, aren't you? And Walter smiles and goes in with the rest of the players. And he solves one of Walter's problems too, before. After everybody goes in, they look at all the trophies and stuff around that are lying in the certificates of baseball. And Hatcher, one of the players, walks over to a piece of old broken trophy, aged. And he picks it up and he goes, Billy, what is this? And Billy looks at him and says, that's my most precious trophy. He goes, this old thing? He goes, you're absolutely right. He goes, I won the Sykeston Little League Championship with a home run in the bottom of the 8th inning. And someone goes, Billy, you got 3 World Series rings. He goes, by far, that's my favorite. It means the most to me, that little trophy. And they all just kind of shake their heads in agreement. Well, that night, a few moments later, after pizza and the talk and everything, the lights are low, and someone says, hey, Billy, do you remember in Cincinnati when you tripped over the bats? And there's laughter fills the darkness. Absolutely hilarious. And then another voice says, hey, Billy, do you remember in Toronto when you got stuck on the elevator, banging on the doors for a half an hour with those 2 old ladies? Everybody cracks up. And then you hear, hey, Billy, and they're waiting for something to be said funny. And you just hear, thanks. And then you hear another voice, yeah, Billy, thanks. And another one, thanks. And Billy sits there. And he takes a picture of Mary and just pats it. And they go to sleep. With the lights out, the camera pans across the street. And standing there is the old man, who just turns and hobbles away on his cane. Well, the next night, it's the 7th game. The players are walking down the runway to the dugout. Billy and Dink are following, and all of a sudden Billy reaches in his back pocket and goes, I forgot Mary's picture. It's in the car. Get the players started. So Billy goes back to his car in the parking lot. It's kind of dark. He opens his car, finds the picture of Mary, puts it in his pocket, and gets out of his car, not any farther than an arm's reach away is the old man looking at him. And Billy looks at him and says, who are you? What do you have to do with this? And the old man, without saying anything, reaches into his tattered coat pocket and hands us this torn, tattered photograph and tells him, I was their bat boy. And Billy looks at the picture. And he goes, would you like to sit in the dugout tonight, like the old days? And the old man pauses and he goes, I don't need to. And he looks up into the concrete of Busch Stadium and says, I live here. Billy doesn't get it. The old man looks at him and says, they're here tonight, you know. They've always been here. And turns and walks away. And Billy kind of gives him a strange look and heads back toward the door. But the next voice he hears isn't the old man behind him. It's the voice of a 13-year-old bat boy. He turns around and the old man is transformed to the way he was. And he says, I'm not only the gang's here, but Ruth, DiMaggio, Gehrig, Satchel Paige, Gibson. They're all here tonight, Billy, for you. And the little boy turns and walks into some light behind him. Billy takes a step back and doesn't know what to say. The next scene is in the dugout, and Dink or Billy sitting on the top, and everybody's getting ready. They're playing catch. It's almost game time. Detroit hasn't shown. And Dink looks to Billy and says, you know, maybe they got scared and left. And then Billy said, that'd be something. About that time, the manager of Detroit takes a step up wearing the old uniform, the vintage uniform of the 34 Tigers, and says, Billy, we got something for you tonight. At that time, the rest of the Tigers step up in their old uniforms. Looks like they've gone back in time. It's absolutely a wonderful scene. So Billy calls his players over. And he says the things that comes to him the best that he knows, the words that come from his heart, and he says, fellas, you know what you can do with those uniforms? You can burn them. For all I care, you can burn them. For all the magic was lying within you, not those uniforms all along. They might have helped bring it out, but the magic was in you. And Hatcher, who gave him all the trouble through this whole thing, looks to Billy and says, the only magic on this field tonight, Billy, is you, because you brought the game back. They all put their hands together and they give a big applause, and the game starts. And the announcers have some great lines. But one thing leads to another: the game's played like it used to be, hard sliding. There's some people laying on other players to get so they can't advance. There's some pushing and shoving, the way it used to be played. There's also tips of the caps on good plays from one player to another on different teams. But then all of a sudden there's a great play. The game ends up, it's the top of the ninth, it's scoreless. And Detroit has bases loaded with no outs. And Hatcher, the veteran pitcher, who was hurt, who was said he wasn't going to pitch anymore in the World Series, is sitting on the bench. And Billy, instead of calling on his number one relief pitcher, who he brought up, who's a sensation the last half of the season, turns to the old aging veteran. Everybody in the stands cannot believe it. The veteran hobbles to the mound, rubbing his arm for the warm-up pitches. The announcer said, I can't understand the strategy here, Chet. This does not make any sense whatsoever. This isn't Hatcher's team. This is a team. This isn't spring training to experiment. This is for the World Championship, for the World Series. So they're on the mound, and Billy has the ball. And he looks to Hatcher and he gives it, just flips it to him and says, for all these years, you deserve this. So he goes off in the course of boos and second guesses thrown at him. But there's something different in Hatcher. Instead of using the modern warm-up, the modern wind-up techniques they use today, he now starts using the double pump wind-up, the windmill wind-up of 1934 of Dizzy Dean's. People can't believe it. An old man stands up in the stands and points a little finger and says, I saw him pitch in 34. That's Dizzy Dean. And this double pump windup, if there were any injuries in Hatcher, he doesn't feel them now. He calls for the player to step in. It's like the old days of baseball. He uses that big windmill windup and throws 3 pitches by. The place is going crazy. He strikes out the first batter. He strikes out the second batter with 105-mile-an-hour fastballs. Scouts are kicking their radar guns, can't believing the speed that's going on here. The next hitter is the best hitter for Detroit. And he is smarted off. He is wisecracked to Hatcher and some of the other players after he hits a home run. And he comes to the plate, and Hatcher walks halfway between the pitcher's mound and home plate and gets the ball from the umpire. And he looks this great hitter in the face, right into the eyes, and says, what pitch is it that you want to miss? And the player looks at him. He goes, give me the fastball, old man. So with already 2 strikes on this hitter, this one pitch is it. He uses this windup, the windmill windup. The place is as quiet as a church. He throws a pitch that reaches 109 miles an hour. That breaks all recorded records. The ball is missed on a late swing by this great hitter. For a moment, Busch Stadium is stunned of what they had just seen. Then the place erupts, the whole stadium. And that hitter who smarted off Hatcher